day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen.
The reading this morning is taken from Luke's Gospel, chapter 11, beginning at verse 5. You can find it on page 1042 of the Pew Bibles, or you'll see it on the screen around the church. So it's Luke chapter 11, beginning at verse 5. Then Jesus said to them, "Suppose one of you has a friend, and he goes to him at midnight and says, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, because a friend of mine on a journey has come to me, and I have nothing to set before him.' Then the one inside answers, 'Don't bother me. The door is already locked, and my children are in bed. I can't get up and give you anything.' I tell you, though he will not get up and give him the bread because he is his friend, yet because of the man's boldness, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. So I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him?" This is the word of the Lord.
So I'd like to invite Emma up from the Boaz Trust. So the Boaz Trust are heroes of mine. They are real pioneers that have been serving very forgotten and very ignored people a lot of the time for a long, long time. They are prophets to Greater Manchester, speaking out for injustice. And yeah, it's a real privilege to have you here with us, Emma. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Well, you don't often get an introduction like that, so I'll try and follow it. But I just want to say Matt and I, my husband, are really happy to be here today. We felt so welcome, and it feels like we're in a very similar place to our church. I was reading the values of your website, kind of the church on the website, and again, they just chime so much with where our hearts are and where the work of Boaz is. So it is really great to be with you here today. Now, I'm holding a piece of bread because today's passage, as you saw, was all about bread, which might seem a little bit unusual when you hear that I'm from the Christian charity, the Boaz Trust. And some of you will know that we are a housing charity for people with refugee status and people who have been seeking asylum who have been refused, find themselves homeless after they've sought asylum. So it might seem a bit strange that this is the passage that I chose, particularly as you probably guessed that our name actually comes from the book of Ruth, and there's a really good story there that I'm happy to come and share another time about why we chose that name. But when I was praying about coming here today, this was the passage that I really felt God was speaking to me about, because I think it's a passage that really has a lot to talk to us about how we should treat people who are seeking safety, how we should welcome people who are refugees and strangers in our midst. So I'm hoping that today this will give you some food for thought, and it certainly has for me. I want to start off, though, by asking you to think about your own neighbours. Today's story is about a neighbour. Just imagine for a moment the people that you live next door to. Now, over the years, Matt and I have lived next to a range of different people. Some of them have been great. Some of them have been perhaps a little bit more challenging. Currently, we've got a lovely family on one side, and we've actually got an older couple that once we moved in, we discovered have actually been friends with my parents for years. I just never knew it, which was a real relief because we actually bought the house during COVID. We spent 5 minutes in the house because my husband has an immune condition, so he had to go very quickly around it. And I pointed out when he said, I really feel God is telling us to buy this house, that I've spent a lot longer contemplating buying jumpers. So it was a bit like, are you sure? But he was really sure. And one of the things I was worried about was the house looks great, but what are the neighbours going to be like? So we prayed about that as well. And I have to say, I think we've been blessed with the best neighbours that we've ever had, actually. But even so, if they woke me up in the middle of the night, banging on my door, even though I love my neighbours, I don't know how happy I would be to have to get up. I think I might be a bit frightened at first at the commotion. I might be a bit unwilling to look outside the window and kind of like see what was happening. I might be a bit annoyed and worried that they were going to wake up my little one, who quite honestly takes a lot to get to sleep in the sort of on any day sort of thing. So getting her back to sleep in the middle of the night would be quite difficult. And I think I'd be a bit reluctant to go downstairs and kind of like find out what it was all about. I think we can be certain that in Jesus' time, this family that we're talking about would definitely have been disturbed and probably would have felt some of those emotions that I'm talking about. Typically, in Jesus' culture, the houses had one room. They were 2/3 was a dirt floor where the animals were kept at night, and then the back 1/3 was an elevated platform where the family slept together. And the door was open all day for hospitality. It's a very important value within those cultures. But at night time, that was when the door was shut, and the family all went to sleep. So if the door is being banged and being opened, the whole family is going to be disturbed. And I don't know if you've ever travelled, or if you've ever been in a house like that, but certainly when I have, kind of when you're sleeping with the animals, if anybody gets up to go to the toilet, if anybody gets up to go to work, the chickens are here, the dogs are here, kind of everything gets really, really disturbed. So I hope that I would be kind. I hope that I would choose to give. But I think in the back of my mind, I might be a little bit concerned. But I also might be feeling a bit like, is there enough to spare? We're talking about 3 loaves of bread, not just one. His neighbour's asking for 3 loaves of bread. And at that time, the village would not have had food stores. Early in the morning, a housewife would have been making the day's supply of bread for the family. It's a duty to sort of like entertain guests, but at the same time, if I'm giving this bread, would that mean that my own children wouldn't have enough? It's not even for my neighbour. It's for a stranger that has woken up my neighbour. So there's a chance that I might also be feeling worried about the scarcity. I've been in communities where they've had no food and where they've generously given to us as the guests. And it's incredible the kind of feeling that you get when you do get offered food, when you know that you eating means that someone else isn't eating. But it must be very difficult for the family. So my heart does go out to them. And I think, wow, they're so kind, so generous. And yet that's not what Jesus says in this story, which is interesting. He says, despite all of these concerns, the man does not want to be woken up. He doesn't choose to give out of kindness. He doesn't choose to give out of friendship. But he does still choose to give. And he chooses to give because of, in the passage that we read, boldness of his neighbour. Other translations might say persistence or importunity. Those words all come to this idea of shamelessness, the idea of carrying on doing something because you really need to. You see a real need. The people who fed me in other countries gave to me because they knew there was no chance of me getting any other food anywhere else. You would have to travel for another 2 days. There is no shops. There is no other option. People here are knocking on the door because he didn't have the bread to be able to give this stranger. He needs to keep knocking. He needs to keep asking his neighbour, even though he probably knew his neighbour didn't want to give. But he's choosing to do it because if he doesn't, he knows that this man's situation is going to be worse. So he carries on doing it. And I think that's one of the things that really strikes me with this kind of passage. It reminds me that it's really important, even when I'm tired, even when it seems hopeless, even when it feels like everybody is ignoring the work that we're doing, Boaz need to keep being persistent. We need to keep raising awareness. We need to keep talking to our friends and our neighbours, even when we see the newspaper articles saying that kind of nobody should be welcomed, that actually everybody who's coming over is a wrong 'un and we don't want them, and there is no room and there is not enough to be able to give to our own friends and our own family. So it's sad, but no, we can't. We do need to keep being persistent. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Don't know who's doing it, but thank you very much. Up here. So this is what Boaz does. You are one of our neighbour churches. We could not do the work that we do without you. We've been in existence for 20 years this year. We started off by Dave Smith, who was running a homelessness charity called the Mustard Tree in Greater Manchester. And he realised that the people coming through, some of them weren't UK citizens. And because of that, they didn't have the options that people here from the UK did have. So he started sort of helping as much as he could, and then he started welcoming people into his own home. And then his friends started welcoming, and his church started welcoming. And today we've got 20 houses across Greater Manchester that are shared houses for men and for women, for people with refugee status and people who have been refused asylum. And they're all people who otherwise would be on the streets. So last year we helped more than 230 people from over 40 countries. But as I say, we're a small charity, really, really tiny. We could not do that without the support of individuals from this church and the kind of mission partners that you've just kind of agreed to doing again. And we're thrilled for it, so thank you. But it's also a reminder to me that although we sometimes hear these things that say there isn't enough room and people are only coming here because they think they can get a free ride, that actually it isn't an easy journey for anybody who comes here. And there's a poet called Warson Shire who says this: "No one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land." And that's something that resonates with me because of the stories that I've heard through the work of Boaz. I did wonder when I joined, am I going to see the bad side? But all I'm seeing is more and more evidence that actually people who are coming here are strong people, they are resilient people, but they do need help, and it isn't just coming here for a free ride. So if we could go on to the next slides. Very quickly, we offer safe accommodation. That's really, really key. If you look at any of the reports, if you are homeless on the street, you cannot think about tomorrow. You can't sort out your legal status. You can't get a job. You can't do all the things that you need to do to rebuild your life. You need to have safe accommodation. And the next one. We're also about holistic support, so providing one-to-one support work for people that is tailored to their individual needs. Counselling, getting legal support, well-being activities, practical support like food and money for train tickets or bus tickets wherever they need to be, and floating support, which isn't as exciting as it sounds, but it is, in my view, it is quite exciting. We are providing housing support for people who are currently in accommodation but are at risk of becoming homeless, so that hopefully they avoid that trap of becoming homeless, and we can kind of help them to unknot some of the problems before they get into that bad situation. So we kind of do drop-in centres, which is where the floating support word comes from. And the next one, please. We're also about equipping churches, because we know that churches are the bedrock of things happening in this country a lot of the time. We want to support projects that are happening within churches. We want to raise awareness. We want to give guidance. We've been doing it for 20 years. So a lot of the time people phone us and say, how can we do this? We've got these people. What can we do? And that's what we're about. And the next one. And we want to look at the root causes as well. We want to change the system. We know that it's completely broken for a lot of people. We're not trying to say that everybody should be here, but what we're trying to make sure is that everybody who does come is able to have a fair and just decision, and they're able to get it quickly so that they're not wasting years of their life. So we're talking to MPs, we're talking to councils, but we're also talking to doctors, trying to make sure people get health care when they need it most, trying to make sure that everybody is in a good situation. So you've heard a lot from me. I thought you might want to hear from Noah, who's somebody who went through one of our houses, and he experienced homelessness and then came to Boaz Trust. If we could play that video, hopefully it works. I think you might have to click once more or at the bottom of the screen. It should just automatically go. Or not today. That's okay. Well, if you're interested in hearing Noah's story, and I do really recommend it, we do have it inside here. There is a page that's got a little QR code here. So if you put your mobile phone in front of that, or if you just go to the website, if you're old school like me, you can actually read this story. Oh, yeah, no, it's just a photo. And you can actually access this story. But just to kind of summarize it, as I said, he experienced street homelessness. He came from a country that was having a big, big war at the time, and he was from a minority and was very much in danger. But before he came to Boaz, he'd been refused and been told that he didn't have a hope, but he also was told that he couldn't go back to his country, which leaves him in a very difficult situation. He chose to share his story, even though it's a risk for him to be seen, and he does it with his whole face showing, which often we suggest that people don't because the internet's everywhere. But he chose to share his story because he said, there are still people like me, homeless, and so I want to take that risk because I want more people to be able to access Boaz, because they came at a time when I felt absolutely distraught. He said that if he hadn't known God at that time, he would have committed suicide, which is terrible. But he's now a leader of his church, and he is doing so much within his community. And the great news is that he's been reunited with some of his family members, which is incredible. So that is a happy story. We do still see a real need, though. The numbers of people who are ending up homeless because of the way that the asylum system is working has actually increased, in July 23, it was 48 people. By December 23, it was 469 people who were homeless, kind of in our bit of Manchester. So you can see a great increase in that. And so we want to do as much as we can to try and get our waiting lists to be reduced and kind of make sure that everybody gets access. Okay, so could we go on to the next two slides, I think? So once more, yeah. So we've got some more stories. As I say, at the back, we've got some of these. So if you want some good news stories, I really recommend you picking up one of those, because one of the best things we can do is to be able to read some of the bright stories, I think, and see where God is actually working, because there are a lot of good stories taking place. And next one, please. Oh, that's a shame. The photo hasn't worked. It goes on my computer, but obviously not here. So I don't know if any of you have heard of Shishiko. I was going to show you some beautiful pictures of Japanese stitching. I was at a well-being session this week with some ladies who were learning the art of sewing, where you take two worn-out pieces of fabric, and rather than trying to invisibly mend them, you actually use stitches to embroider them in bright colours and kind of like to make it beautiful again. Sort of, for me, a real reminder of how Jesus actually takes our lives and kind of takes some of the things that have hurt us and actually can really transform them and really change them. But there was a lady that I wanted to tell you about who said that she was about to go to a doctor's appointment. She was feeling very, very stressed about that before she came to this. But she said by doing that kind of activity that's going to go into a big art piece and is there to kind of teach people about kind of mental health and well-being with an art therapist, she said it kind of helped her to release some of that stress And she was so proud of the work that she'd done, and the other ladies were encouraging her so much. And it was that activity that kind of just helped to kind of get her speaking to a support worker. So I think kind of just be aware that some of the things that we're doing, as well as the big concrete things, is actually the little actions that can really make a big difference in people being able to overcome some of their trauma and being able to kind of be seen as a real human, not just a number, which is sometimes, unfortunately, what we see. So I'm aware of time. I wanted, before I finish, though, to look at what you guys can do. We've got some of these leaflets at the back and some white ones as well, which will allow you to sign up for our prayer and our newsletters. And I think for me, they're one of the key things, because in this passage, it talks about the neighbour keeping going and keeping being persistent. And I think for me, the thing that helps fuel me is the newsletters and the prayer points that tell us where we've seen answers to prayer and what we need to continue to pray about. But also the newsletter which shows what's happening around the country, what are the different initiatives, what are the resources, how can we kind of challenge some of the facts that we hear that we know are probably not true, but where are the actual statistics that we can get to challenge some of those conversations and things like that. Can we move on to the next one, please? We want to really change the dialogue and kind of how people are treated about that. And the next one. We know that there's a lot of violence in the situation, but we've also, if we go on to the next one, sorry, as well. We also know that there's a thing called slow violence. So we've got some of these reports. If you want to get a copy of this, I can put your email down on the sign-up sheet and I can send it to you. I've only got a few with me today. But these are really looking at what changes could happen within the asylum system that would actually stop some of the indignities that are there, but also help to speed things up, how to kind of like make it so that the councils are actually able to respond to people. And it's a really in-depth look, rather than a kind of wide-ranging look, a really in-depth look at some people's different stories and their experiences and how we can really make a big change. So I think this piece of research, kind of like linking with the Immigration Aid Unit from Greater Manchester, which is a legal support that we work, really does shed a big lot of light on some of the people's experiences. If we could go on to the next one, please. And yeah, that's from the report. The other thing that the church could do is sign up with Together Refugees, if you haven't already, a fair new plan for refugees, which, if we can get enough churches and organisations to do this, it shows MPs and decision makers that actually we do want to be a welcoming society and we do want to kind of make room. And these are ways that we can do things. And they've got some really great resources, so I really encourage you to use your voice in that way. And the next one, please. This was just to sort of say thank you for the gifts that you've given us. I know that there's individuals and as a church you've also given, which is amazing. But these are some of the things that even small amounts actually make a massive difference. So £30, if you're giving that over a time or kind of like monthly, can provide new bedding and towels. And if you see the smiles on people's faces as they kind of like are greeted into the house and telling us they're feeling like they're being treated like kings and queens, it's amazing. Also, kind of being able to provide kind of like the safe housing, £152 or £660 for a month, being able to provide that room that actually is the bedrock for all of the support that we do and making sure that people have got the chance of building a future. So thank you so much for everybody who is giving to that. It really makes a massive difference. I know it might not feel like you're giving a house, but there may be some of you here who have donated housing, in which case, thank you very much, that's incredible. But kind of the bread is really important as well. The kind of giving that small amount. It might not feel like you're doing much, but as we bring it all together, God is able to multiply that and actually make a massive difference in people's lives. And it really does make that difference. Could we go on to the next slide? But I wanted to finish off by saying that for us, prayer is the ultimate bedrock. I've got a friend from 24/7 Prayer who says that you breathe in prayer and you breathe out social action. And if you do too much of just breathing in, then you hyperventilate. And if you do too much of breathing out, then you don't have anything to sort of like energize you and are able to go. But actually, we're supposed to breathe in and breathe out. And that's what that passage, coming back to it, says. It says that we really need to rely on God. He if we are going to be generous to our friends, how much more is God wanting to answer our prayers? This is his work that he's inviting us to be part of. He's not saying that we should do it and that's the way that you earn your place in heaven. He's saying that this is my work and I'm inviting you to do it. And if you love me, this is how you show me that you love me, you love other people. So thank you that this is a church that is so clearly true. And I thought we could finish with this prayer that I learnt shortly after I got back from Sierra Leone, which I really enjoy. So I'll hold the bread and we can maybe pray together if that's okay. So, God bless to us this bread. Give bread to all who are hungry, and a hunger for justice to all who are fed. God bless to us this bread. Amen. I'll be at the back later. If you've got any questions, if you want to sign up for anything to get extra resources, I'd love to speak with you. But thank you very much, and God bless to you all.